Have you ever thought about how quickly society judges someone just by their appearance? One outfit, one pair of shoes, one glance, that's all it takes for people to decide whether you belong or not. This is the story of Helena, a woman dismissed as invisible because she didn't look the part. She was humiliated in front of strangers inside a luxury boutique. But what nobody knew that day was that she would soon return, not as a rejected customer, but as the true owner of everything they worshipped. Stay with me until the end, because this story carries one of the most powerful reversals you'll ever see. And before we begin, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories that will make you reflect on the value of respect. It was late afternoon in New York City. The sidewalks pulsed with the rhythm of polished shoes and hurried conversations. Yellow cabs honked, glass buildings shimmered, and high-end stores lined the avenue like temples of wealth. Among them stood Maison Lorraine, a luxury boutique known for handbags that could cost more than a year's rent, dresses stitched with imported silk, and jewelry that sparkled under carefully designed spotlights. Inside, the air was chilled, scented with faint notes of jasmine and leather. Marble floors reflected the glow of crystal chandeliers. Velvet benches were placed in precise symmetry, as if every detail was calculated to remind you that this was no ordinary store. It wasn't just a place to shop, it was a theater where money and image were the leading actors. The sales associates glided across the room like performers, each one in black suits tailored to perfection. Their smiles were rehearsed, their gazes sharp. They didn't simply sell products, they evaluated people. Every client who walked in was assessed within seconds: the cut of a blazer, the brand of a watch, the confidence in a stride. Here, appearance was currency, and those who didn't have enough of it weren't welcome. On that particular afternoon, two associates stood near the glass counter, whispering to each other as they polished already spotless shelves. "Yesterday a woman came in wearing sneakers and a thrift store jacket," one of them murmured. "She didn't buy a thing, just touched everything like she belonged." The other chuckled. "People like that should shop in discount malls, not here." They laughed softly, their voices dripping with superiority, while across the room a manager monitored the floor. Tall, with slicked back hair and a jaw that rarely softened, Mr. Barlow was obsessed with image. To him, the boutique wasn't just merchandise, it was status carved into walls and fabrics. If someone walked in who didn't fit, he considered it a contamination of the brand, and then the glass doors opened with a gentle chime. Helena stepped inside. Her entrance wasn't grand. She wore a plain cream blouse, a pair of slacks that had seen better days, and shoes slightly worn at the edges. Her hair was tied back in a simple bun. She carried no designer handbag, only a modest canvas tote. She didn't belong to the theater of luxury, or at least that was what everyone assumed. Immediately heads turned. Two women seated on a velvet bench exchanged a look of disgust. A man sipping champagne with his wife raised an eyebrow. One of the associates tilted her head and whispered under her breath, "Wrong store, darling." Helena walked slowly, absorbing the details. She wasn't intimidated by the chandeliers or the marble. Instead, she looked at the items with a quiet appreciation, as if studying more than shopping. Her gaze landed on a handbag displayed in the center, a leather piece, meticulously stitched, glowing under the lights. She reached out, gently touching the fabric, not out of entitlement, but curiosity. That single gesture was enough. An associate, Renato, glided toward her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Can I assist you?" His tone carried an edge, a question wrapped in doubt. Helena smiled politely. "I'm just looking, thank you." Renato crossed his arms. "Well, you should know our prices are significant. Some of these pieces are handcrafted in Italy. They're not exactly the kind of items one just browses for fun." Helena's cheeks warmed, but she kept her voice calm. "I understand. I'd just like to take a closer look." Renato gave a short laugh and turned his head toward another associate across the room. Loud enough for nearby customers to hear, he said, "Another window shopper. Some people walk in here like it's a museum." Soft chuckles rippled through the store. A couple of clients smirked, sipping their champagne like spectators enjoying a show. Helena set the handbag down carefully, as if handling glass. She wanted to leave, but her pride urged her to hold her ground. For years, she had worked tirelessly, lived simply, and carried herself with dignity. Was it really so wrong to step into a store and admire the craftsmanship of a bag? The whispers grew louder. A woman in pearls leaned toward her friend and muttered, "She probably can't afford the zipper." Another customer shook his head, chuckling, "These places should have better security." Finally, Mr. Barlow, the manager, strode forward. His polished shoes tapped against the marble floor, each step filled with silent judgment. He stopped directly in front of Helena, his expression sharp. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but authoritative, "we ask that our clients respect the environment of this boutique. If you're not here to make a purchase, I must ask you to leave." The words sliced the air. Conversations paused. Even the pianist in the corner seemed to lower the volume of his notes. Helena blinked, stunned. I was only looking," she whispered. "Exactly," Barlow replied, "and our clients don't feel comfortable with that." He gestured toward the door. Two security guards, as if on cue, approached from the sides. Helena felt the weight of every stare pressing into her skin. Heat rose in her chest, shame mixing with anger. She wanted to scream, to tell them they had no idea who she really was, but her throat locked. So she did the only thing left. She lifted her chin, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward the door. Each step echoed like thunder in her ears. As she passed the crowd, she caught fragments of murmurs, snickers, whispers, dismissive remarks. A young man in a tailored suit leaned back and laughed openly. "Guess they're cleaning house," he said. At the threshold, Helena paused. For a split second she turned and met the manager's eyes. His face was smug, satisfied with what he thought was victory, but Helena's gaze wasn't broken. It carried something sharper, a silent promise. "You don't know me yet, but you will." And with that, she stepped into the cold evening air. Outside, the city buzzed as if nothing had happened. Helena stood still, the neon lights reflecting on her weary face. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled, but she refused to cry in front of strangers. She sat on a nearby bench, staring back at the glowing boutique windows. Behind those glass panes, laughter still floated, champagne still sparkled, wealth still strutted. And yet, none of them knew the truth, that the woman they had mocked was the rightful heir to every chandelier, every bag, every piece of marble in that place. Inside her canvas tote, tucked in a sealed envelope, were documents that proved it. That night as she walked home, one thought circled relentlessly in her mind. They thought they were rejecting me. Soon they'll discover they rejected their own boss, and that revelation would shake every single one of them to their core. So tell me, what would you do in Helena's place? Walk away silently or return to prove them wrong? Leave your answer in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the turn this story takes will leave you speechless. The night Helena returned home, her mind replayed every second of what had happened in the boutique. She laid her tote on the kitchen table of her modest apartment and slowly pulled out the envelope. The papers inside weren't just paperwork. They were proof of the unexpected inheritance she had received weeks earlier. Her late uncle, a man she hadn't seen in years but who had built one of the country's most respected retail empires, had named her as his sole heir. She had grown up believing she would always live on the edges of wealth, close enough to glimpse it but never to touch it. Now, fate had thrown her into the very center of the world that had humiliated her. And yet, despite holding the titles, the deeds, and the ownership of multiple luxury boutiques, she hadn't announced it publicly. The legal transition was still underway, and she hadn't rushed it. Part of her wanted to observe quietly first, to understand the empire before stepping into it. But after what she had lived through that afternoon, she knew one thing for certain. When she returned, it wouldn't be as the woman they mocked. It would be as their boss. Helena spent the following days in a blur of conflicting emotions. Shame still clung to her whenever she remembered the laughter, the way Renato had spoken to her like she was dirt under his shoes, the look of smugness on Mr. Barlow's face as he ordered her out. But alongside that humiliation burned a fire of determination. She promised herself she wouldn't let bitterness consume her. If she was truly going to take control of her uncle's empire, she had to decide what kind of leader she wanted to be. For hours, she sat at her kitchen table, writing notes in a leather-bound journal. "What is luxury without respect?" she wrote on one page. On another, she scribbled, "How many people have been turned away simply for looking like me?" The more she thought about it, the more she realized that her uncle's legacy, while vast, carried an invisible rot: arrogance. When she finally met with the lawyers, she signed the last set of documents that officially transferred ownership to her. They congratulated her, but Helena felt no triumph, only resolve. Her first mission wasn't profit or expansion, it was change. She wanted to transform those stores into places where people weren't judged before they opened their mouths. On a cold Friday morning, Helena stood outside the same boutique that had expelled her. The sun reflected off the glass facade, dazzling the eyes of passers-by. She wasn't alone this time. Two of her lawyers walked beside her, each carrying official folders stamped with the company's seal. Her heart pounded as she reached for the door. Inside, the boutique was as polished as ever. Customers browsed handbags displayed under perfect lighting. Associates floated across the marble, their gazes sharp, their smiles thin. For them, this was just another day of selling illusions. Until Helena walked in. The moment she stepped through the doors, whispers began. A woman by the jewelry counter nudged her friend. "That's the lady who got thrown out last week." Renato froze mid-step. He recognized her instantly, his smirk faltering. He turned to another associate and hissed, "What is she doing back here?" Helena didn't flinch. She walked straight through the aisle, her steps measured, her posture steady. Behind her, her lawyers followed like shadows. Every eye in the room was on her. Mr. Barlow approached, his expression tight. "Ma'am," he said, his voice stiff but polite, "I believe we've spoken before. If you're here to—" Helena interrupted, her voice calm, yet sharp enough to cut the tension. "Yes, we have spoken. Last time you asked me to leave. Today I came back to stay." Barlow blinked, confused. The lawyers stepped forward, handing him a sealed envelope. He tore it open, scanning the first page. His jaw tightened. The words in bold print couldn't be mistaken. Transfer of ownership. He flipped through page after page, his face draining of color as the realization set in. Renato stepped closer, trying to peek at the documents. "What is it?" he asked, his voice uneasy. Barlow cleared his throat, his voice suddenly unsteady. She owns the store." The boutique fell silent. The pianist in the corner missed a note. Customers stopped mid-sentence. Even the sound of shoes on marble seemed to vanish. Helena faced the crowd. Her eyes swept across the associates, the clients, and finally landed on the man who had laughed as she walked out days earlier. Her voice carried across the room with calm authority. "I am the new owner of Maison Lorraine, and I need to make something very clear. The treatment I received here will never happen again, not to me and not to anyone else who walks through those doors." The silence broke into murmurs. Some customers whispered in disbelief. A few clapped softly, impressed by the reversal. Others simply stared, ashamed of what they had witnessed before. Renato's face turned red. He stammered, I didn't know." Helena looked directly at him. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't care to know. You assumed." She turned back to the rest of the room. "Luxury means nothing if it comes at the expense of dignity. From this day forward, no customer will be judged by their clothing, their shoes, or the weight of their wallet. Respect will be our first product." Mr. Barlow swallowed hard, the arrogance stripped from him. "Understood," he murmured. Helena wasn't finished. I'm not here to fire you all, though I could. I'm here to give you a second chance, to prove you can treat every person who enters this store as human first, client second. If you fail to do that, you will no longer work here. Consider this your warning." The weight of her words sank deep. Some associates lowered their eyes, ashamed. Others nodded quickly, desperate to show obedience. Across the boutique, a woman in a modest sweater stepped hesitantly toward a shelf of handbags. An associate, visibly nervous under Helena's gaze, rushed over, not with sarcasm this time, but with genuine warmth. "Good afternoon, ma'am. May I help you find something special?" Helena watched, her chest tightening with both relief and sorrow. Why had it taken ownership papers to force kindness? As she prepared to leave, she turned once more to the room. "Remember this moment," she said quietly. "The day you mocked me was the day you mocked your own future. Learn from it. Don't repeat it." With that, she walked out, leaving the boutique buzzing with whispers and regret. That night, back in her apartment, Helena sat by the window, staring at the city skyline. She thought of the faces that had judged her, the laughter that had burned her skin. She also thought of the silence that followed her revelation, the way the air had shifted when the truth came out. But deep down, she knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about something larger, changing the culture her uncle had left behind. She didn't want these boutiques to remain temples of arrogance. She wanted them to become places where beauty met respect. The next step would be harder than humiliating a few associates. It would be reshaping an entire empire, and Helena was ready. The weekend after Helena revealed herself as the new owner, the story spread faster than she expected. A customer who had been present during her second visit posted about it online, describing in detail how a humble woman everyone mocked turned out to be the new boss. Within days, blogs and local news outlets picked it up. Some framed it as an inspiring tale of resilience, others as a scandal exposing prejudice in the luxury industry. Helena avoided interviews. She wasn't interested in turning her private life into a media circus, but she couldn't avoid the consequences. Every store in the chain buzzed with whispers, associates nervous about whether their behavior might be exposed next. Customers entered with sharper eyes, wondering if they too might stumble upon a hidden heir or powerful figure disguised as an ordinary person. At first, Helena found the attention exhausting, but then she realized something. The embarrassment her employees now felt was the same humiliation she had endured. The difference was that for her, it had been raw and personal. For them, it was an opportunity to reflect. She couldn't waste that chance. On Monday morning, she arrived at the company headquarters for the first time. The glass skyscraper towered over downtown, its marble lobby gleaming with the same cold perfection she had seen in the boutiques. Executives in tailored suits crossed the space with clipped steps, their faces masks of control. Few noticed her when she walked in wearing the same simple coat she always wore. The receptionist, following old habits, almost dismissed her until one of the lawyers whispered in her ear. Immediately, her posture changed, her voice trembling as she said, "Good morning, Miss Hartman." Helena nodded politely and stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she caught her reflection in the mirrored panel. For a moment, she almost laughed. Just days ago, she had been treated as if she didn't belong. Now she was about to walk into a boardroom where every one of those polished executives would be forced to acknowledge her authority. When she entered the conference room, conversations halted. A long mahogany table stretched across the space, surrounded by men and women who had spent decades climbing the corporate ladder. They expected the heir to be one of their own, polished, wealthy, predictable. Instead, they found Helena, calm, modestly dressed, carrying nothing but a folder and her determination. The chairman, an older man with silver hair, cleared his throat. "Ms. Hartman, welcome. We didn't expect you so soon." Helena set her folder on the table. "I didn't expect to come so soon either, but recent events made it necessary." The executives exchanged glances. Some were curious, others skeptical. A few looked outright annoyed. One woman leaned forward, her voice polite but cutting. "With all due respect, you've never managed a company before. These boutiques represent millions in revenue. Running them requires more than good intentions." Helena met her gaze steadily. "You're right. I don't have years of corporate experience, but I do know what it feels like to be treated as if you're invisible, and if that continues, this company won't survive the future, no matter how much money it makes today." The room fell silent. The executives weren't used to hearing morality placed above profit. Helena took a breath and continued, "I'm not here to replace efficiency with sentiment. I'm here to remind you that our reputation is fragile. One act of arrogance can destroy what decades of marketing have built. I experienced that firsthand, and I won't allow it again." One man at the far end of the table chuckled softly, shaking his head. "With all due respect, Ms. Hartman, luxury has always been about exclusivity. People come to us because not everyone belongs. That's what makes it desirable." Helena turned to him, her voice calm but firm. "Exclusivity doesn't have to mean cruelty. You can create a sense of prestige without humiliating those who walk through the door. If our success depends on belittling people, then it's built on sand." The man looked away, his smirk fading. Helena outlined her first set of changes. Each store would undergo a new training program, emphasizing respect, inclusivity, and empathy. Customer experience would be evaluated not only by sales figures, but by satisfaction ratings, gathered anonymously. Employees who repeatedly disrespected clients would face dismissal, regardless of their sales numbers. The executives shifted uneasily. These weren't minor adjustments, they were a cultural overhaul. Some scribbled notes, others frowned, but no one interrupted. Helena's voice carried the weight of someone who wasn't asking permission. After the meeting, she stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. The city spread out before her, skyscrapers gleaming under the afternoon sun. For the first time since inheriting the empire, she felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't about avenging her humiliation anymore. It was about shaping the future. That evening, Helena visited another boutique unannounced. She walked in quietly, her presence unnoticed at first. A young woman in a crisp black blazer approached her. "Good evening, ma'am. Welcome to Maison Lorraine. May I show you something?" There was no sarcasm in her tone, no hidden smirk. Her smile seemed genuine. Helena nodded, testing the waters. "I'm just browsing, thank you." "Of course," the associate said warmly. "Take your time. If you need anything, I'll be right here." Helena walked the aisles slowly, observing. Other customers entered, one in a tailored dress, another in jeans and sneakers. Both received the same courteous treatment. It was only the first week, but the difference was already palpable. Later, she sat in a quiet cafe across the street, sipping tea and watching the boutique's glowing windows. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to relax. Maybe change was possible after all. But transformation always brings resistance. The following morning, she received an anonymous letter slipped under her office door. The handwriting was jagged, the words bitter. "You don't belong here. You'll ruin everything. Leave before it's too late." Helena read it twice, her chest tightening. She knew not everyone would welcome her vision. Some employees saw her as a threat, not a leader, but fear couldn't deter her now. She folded the letter, placed it in her drawer, and whispered to herself, "If they think intimidation will stop me, they don't know who I am." That week, she began visiting stores across the city, sometimes alone, sometimes with her team. At each location, she watched closely how associates greeted customers, how managers addressed complaints, how security treated people at the door. Some stores impressed her, others left her deeply disappointed. In one boutique uptown, she witnessed a scene that mirrored her own humiliation. A young man in worn sneakers had entered hesitantly, scanning the displays. The store manager, without even greeting him, whispered to an associate, He's not buying anything. Keep an eye on him." Helena's stomach tightened. She stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Is that how you welcome customers here?" The manager turned, startled. When he recognized her, his face drained of color. "Ms. Hartman, I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean for me to hear," she interrupted. "But you meant every word." The young man, confused, looked between them. Helena approached him gently. "You're welcome here," she said. "Take your time. If anyone makes you feel otherwise, let me know directly." The man smiled nervously, nodding. Helena turned back to the manager. "This is exactly what will end today. If you can't treat people with respect, you can't work here. Do you understand?" The manager swallowed hard and nodded. Walking out of the store later, Helena felt the weight of responsibility settle deeper on her shoulders. Changing one location wasn't enough. She needed to send a message across the entire chain. The culture of arrogance was finished. That night, she drafted a company-wide directive. Every boutique would be required to hold weekly staff meetings focused on customer respect. Training programs would be mandatory. Feedback would be collected directly from customers, and Helena herself would review it. She didn't want numbers on a chart. She wanted proof of transformation. As she signed the document, she thought again of the day she had been escorted out, the laughter echoing behind her. That moment had wounded her deeply, but now she realized it had also given her purpose. Without that humiliation, she might never have understood the depth of the problem. Without the pain, she wouldn't have found the strength to lead. And as the city lights flickered outside her apartment window, Helena whispered, "They thought they broke me, but they built me instead." Helena's reforms shook the company to its core. Managers who had long thrived on intimidation bristled under her new rules. A few quit outright, muttering that she would ruin the brand. Others tried to undermine her, dragging their feet in implementing changes, hoping she would lose patience and step aside. But Helena didn't waver. She had lived through humiliation in the most public way imaginable. Nothing they could throw at her compared to the sting of being laughed out of her own store. Every sneer from the old guard only hardened her resolve. She spent long hours on the road, visiting boutique after boutique, city after city. She insisted on talking to the staff directly, sometimes in the stockroom, sometimes over a coffee break. "Tell me the truth," she'd say. "How are things really changing?" At first, employees hesitated, fearing repercussions, but slowly they began to open up. Some admitted they felt liberated, finally allowed to treat every customer with decency instead of suspicion. Others confessed they still didn't understand why it mattered. One night, after a long day of travel, Helena sat alone in her hotel room, scrolling through emails. One caught her eye, a message from a single mother who worked at one of the boutiques. The woman wrote, "For years I felt I had to put on a mask of arrogance to survive in this company. I hated myself for it. Since your changes, I can finally be myself with customers. Thank you." Helena closed her laptop slowly, her eyes stinging. That single message reminded her why she had taken on the fight. It wasn't just about the clients, it was about the workers too. They deserved dignity as much as the people they served, but resistance was far from over. During a quarterly board meeting, an older executive slammed his folder shut. "With all due respect, Ms. Hartman, sales are dropping. Customers don't come to us for kindness. They come for exclusivity. You're stripping away what makes us who we are." Helena leaned forward, her hands steady on the table. Sales dropped because arrogance drove customers away. People have choices. They'll pay for quality, yes, but they won't pay to be insulted. Another executive chimed in, his voice sharp. "We can't afford to turn this into a charity. Luxury has always been about making people want to belong." Helena's voice sharpened. "And who decides who belongs? You, the sales clerk at the door, the manager who rolls his eyes at someone's shoes? No. From now on, if someone walks through our doors, they belong. That's how we'll survive the next generation." The room went silent. It was clear. She would not bend. The turning point came one Saturday afternoon when Helena returned to the same flagship boutique where she had first been humiliated. This time, she didn't enter quietly. Her arrival had been announced in advance, and the entire staff was lined up, nervous, waiting. Customers buzzed with curiosity, many recognizing her from the viral story. She walked past them slowly, her presence commanding, but not haughty. She stopped at the very display where she had once touched a bag and been told to be careful. The same bag sat there, elegant and untouchable. Helena lifted it gently, examined it, and set it back down. Then she turned to the gathered employees. "Do you remember the day I was asked to leave? Some of you were here, some of you laughed, others stayed silent. What you didn't know was that I owned this place. But it shouldn't take ownership for someone to deserve respect. That is the lesson I expect all of you to carry." The staff shifted uncomfortably, shame written on their faces. But Helena wasn't there to humiliate them. She was there to seal the transformation. She gestured toward the door, where a woman in faded jeans had just stepped in, looking uncertain. Helena smiled at her. "Welcome," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Take your time. We're here to serve you." The woman blinked in surprise, then smiled nervously. The staff quickly followed Helena's lead, greeting her warmly, offering assistance without judgment. The atmosphere shifted. For the first time, the boutique felt like a place of beauty rather than exclusion. Customers noticed. A ripple of admiration moved through the room. Later that evening, Helena sat in her office, reviewing numbers. Sales had started to climb again. Not dramatically, but steadily. More importantly, customer satisfaction reports were higher than ever. People weren't just buying products, they were buying the experience of being treated with dignity. The same news outlets that had once covered her humiliation now praised her leadership. One article read, "Helena Hartmann proves luxury and humanity can coexist." Another declared her the unlikely revolutionary of modern retail. Helena smiled faintly at the headlines, but she didn't let them distract her. What mattered wasn't the praise, but the change she had sparked. Weeks later, she returned alone to the bench outside the boutique where she had once sat in tears after being escorted out. The city lights shimmered, and the store windows glowed warmly across the street. She remembered the sting of humiliation, the laughter, the tears she had swallowed, and she remembered the vow she had made. They'll laugh at themselves one day. Now, she saw it had come true. She wasn't just the owner of a luxury empire. She was the proof that respect was worth more than any brand label. Helena closed her eyes, letting the night air wash over her. She knew the fight wasn't over. There would always be prejudice in the world. But she had turned her pain into a foundation for change. And that was enough, because true luxury wasn't in the chandeliers, the marble floors, or the price tags. It was in treating people like they mattered, and Helena had made sure her empire would never forget that lesson. So let me ask you, what would you have done in Helena's place? Walked away quietly or stood tall until the world saw you for who you really are? If this story touched you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it. Because the next time someone is judged by appearances, maybe your voice will be the one that makes the difference.